the John Wick franchise works. It's an example of how contemporary films demonstrate the delicate balance of storytelling in film franchises. In this video, we'll be discussing some of the content from the fourth John Wick film that just released in theaters, as well as plot from each of the films currently released. So please note, there will be spoilers. Inherently, people tend to think of a story and categorize it under ongoing or self-contained. Ongoing stories in motion pictures allow the storytellers to lead an audience through journeys to certain goals, indicating the end of one stretch of the adventure and the beginning of the next. Self-contained stories have similar goals, but usually focus on a much grander scale and indicate emotional closure for the lead characters and usually the story world. Some stories written specifically for film may feel forced to have a sequel. The first film usually, though in some odd cases not always, needs to be successful for a production studio to greenlight another installment. This practice collides with planning in storytelling. If a screenplay gets picked up and it's a standalone story with a clear and satisfying beginning and end, and there isn't planning given to how it may work with the sequel, this is where the storytelling can feel derailed. And it may be why people are cautiously optimistic when sequels are announced for what feels like a standalone film. Unless the films are adaptations of a serialized story, planning for a series of films presents storytellers with a difficult task. What actionable and emotional goal can you have for the end of a film that would be satisfying and would honor the main character's journey while still leaving room for more growth in a new adventure? Often, storytellers can try to circumvent this problem by instead coming up with a prequel. The character we know in the first film released perhaps hinted at a backstory that the storyteller can expand upon in a prequel. There may be a snag, though, when trying to weave in more to a character than an audience expects. Audiences have become familiar with archetypes and structural guideposts in stories. The simplicity of once upon a time invokes familiarity. Is it a princess that was kidnapped, perhaps by a dragon, and a young knight was tasked with saving her? These templates, audiences know, are setups for storytellers to fill in the gaps. Is the knight an unlikely hero? Is the dragon actually evil? Is the princess truly helpless? However the storyteller adapts the template for their own themes, in general, we can expect the protagonist, the knight in this example, to undergo some changes from the beginning of the story to the end. The same is said for the princess and the dragon. This change will help bring some form of closure to the tale. And if that's the case, closure in a story may feel final. Anything added or changed may strike audiences as almost some form of betrayal. We can look at why it may feel this way by referring to Campbell's monomyth, further adapted by Vogler for a character's growth in a story, the hero's journey. A character feels complete if they somehow face the external problem of the story world, but also their own internal struggle. At the end of the first Jaws film, we found logical conclusions for our cast of characters and the story world's main problem. So when Jaws 2 released, that feeling of betrayal stems from the sequel's breaking of several world-building and character-building rules the first film set up. How did John Wick avoid this? John Wick, released in 2014, followed a very clear, actionable storyline, as well as an emotional journey for our titular hero. We get a very clear picture of where John's coming from. His tragic backstory of love found, then lost. How he spends his days trying to survive his new life. The strength of his love still providing solace to him in an unlikely source. When the catalysts pile up to the heartbreaking, inciting incident, John's steps into Act 2 are satisfying. And as we near the finality of the third, or final act, aptly named as final because sometimes scholars and storytellers appreciate the versatility of dividing up the often cumbersome heft of Act 2 into smaller, manageable acts, John has found the end of both his actionable journey and his emotional journey. His actionable goal of vengeance is logical. even as more steps are added to get to that point. His emotional goal of allowing himself to recognize he is both an assassin and a man capable of love is realized. The rules of the story world are established and respected. Points that are made and challenged find consequences. This makes John Wick a great standalone film. What makes it work as a series, then, is the understanding of the original story, its characters, and the rules of the world already established. The second John Wick film finds an interesting way to further build out lore that makes sense in the world, while also sparking John Wick's embarking into a new journey. It doesn't feel out of character for John, and it fleshes out more of his role in the world. The final act builds up the stakes for what will inevitably be the sequel, and brings up a new emotional revelation for John, that his burning vengeance has set him against the rules of the world, and he will have to deal with those consequences. It doesn't betray the rules of the world already built in films 1 and 2. It also doesn't betray the audience's buy-in to how the characters, and in particular John Wick, operate and adapt in the world. John Wick changes just enough. He overcomes what he may see as certain flaws. They can help him evolve, whether it be for better or worse. John Wick 3 is very much an expected sequel, picking up exactly where the second film ended. We get more rules that fit into the world, and the lore may seem grandiose upon expositing, but still matches with the build-up from the first 2 installments. By the time we get to John Wick 4, our protagonist seems somewhat aimless. The actionable goals in previous films have been solid and easy to follow. The emotional journey shifted in interesting but logical ways. So no matter how strange the extended lore of the new stories of John Wick may seem, audiences at least had an emotional journey that made sense for the character in the story world. Of being forced back into an old world, reconciling it with the loss of his wife and the puppy she purposely left with him, and then adopting a new dog. Being called to answer an irrevocable promise he made in order to flee his past life to be with his wife. Committing one of the most irredeemable crimes in the story world, temporarily crumbling under the rules of the world once again in order to survive the consequences he wrought from his crime, being sacrificed by the person he committed treason for. It's quite the laundry list of emotional internal journeys John Wick has undergone since film 1. And now in film 4, what's the biggest change John can undergo? It's a goal that does make sense: destroy the system that's essentially his living purgatory. How he goes about it is exciting, as this type of film should be. Lots of action and twists. For those familiar with video games, the concept of smaller objectives in order to complete the main objectives feels like an apt comparison. We meet more interesting characters and see how the story world will continue on with them, and the new rules being established with each action from them, as well as seeing those we've known for some time. But how much more can Wick change? He's evolved and reverted, but never in ways that felt illogical or like a betrayal of the audience's engagement. It's hard to keep a protagonist changing enough for an emotional impact in each film. Perhaps a solution for storytellers with a franchise like this could consider Wick being a secondary character in some other films. The stories told could expand with a rather unchanged John, who acts as an anchor as we fill out other tales in the same world. But when the spotlight is on a character, the audience expects something with them to change, even just a bit. And so the conclusion for John Wick 4 felt logical. It's difficult to think a story like this may end with such a cool and interesting protagonist. But for the sake of story logic, it can certainly be described as just that, a logical story end to reflect the end of a hero's journey. Thank you for watching this episode of Workshopping Stories. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like. Which character do you want to see more of in the John Wick world? Let us know in the comments below. Thanks again for watching.